The underestimated World Commander Velox pressed his scaled hand against the observation deck's transparent aluminum, watching the blue-green planet slowly rotate below his ship. Earth, such a simple name for what the Kethran databases had classified as a developing primitive civilization. The planet's inhabitants had only recently begun launching crude metal vessels beyond their atmosphere, still relied on fossil fuels for most of their energy needs, and seemed incapable of unifying under a single planetary government. Commander. His second-in-command, Captain Thane, approached with a datapad clutched in his six-fingered grip. The reconnaissance drones have completed their survey. The humans appear to be exactly as our long-range sensors indicated. Technologically primitive, politically fractured, and completely unaware of galactic civilization. Velox's four eyes blinked in sequence as he processed the information. The Kethran Empire had been monitoring this sector for over 2 centuries, keeping detailed records of all developing species within their territorial boundaries. Earth had always been marked as non-priority in their files. While other worlds had advanced interstellar travel and energy manipulation, humans were still fighting wars with chemical explosives and metal projectiles. Their largest military vehicles still require wheels to move across their planet's surface. Thane continued, his voice carrying the typical Kethran mixture of amusement and superiority. They have primitive aircraft that cannot even escape their own gravity well without massive fuel expenditure. Most remarkably, they appear to spend more resources fighting each other than developing their technology. The irony of the situation was not lost on Velox. 3 months ago, the Kethran Empire had been the undisputed masters of this galactic arm, their crystalline cities spanning dozens of worlds, their biomechanical technology centuries ahead of most known species. They had viewed themselves as the guardians of lesser civilizations, the wise shepherds guiding primitive species toward enlightenment. Then the Nexus swarm had arrived. The first reports had seemed impossible. Entire star systems going dark within days. Kethran fleets vanishing without sending distress signals. When the survivors finally reached the core worlds, their reports painted a picture that chilled even the most experienced military commanders. The Nexus was not simply another conquering empire. They were something far worse, a parasitic collective that consumed entire civilizations, absorbing their knowledge, technology, and biological material to strengthen their ever-growing swarm. Traditional warfare had proven useless against them. The Nexus learned and adapted faster than any defense could be developed. Energy weapons that destroyed their ships in the first engagement would be completely ineffective in the second. Offensive strategies that saved worlds one day would be turned against their creators the next. The swarm's collective intelligence processed information at rates that made even Kethran's supercomputers seem primitive. In 6 months, the Nexus had consumed 40% of the Kethran Empire. Sir, Communications Officer Yara 7 interrupted Velox's dark thoughts. We're receiving a priority transmission from High Command. A holographic image of Supreme Commander Drex materialized in the center of the bridge. Even through the blue-tinted projection, Velox could see the exhaustion in his superior's eyes. Dark patches of stress molting were visible around Drex's neck, a sign that the Empire's leader was pushing his body beyond its limits. Commander Velox, Drex's voice carried across the void with grim authority. The Nexus has broken through our defenses at the Kepler Nexus. They will reach the Sol system within 72 hours. Your orders are to make contact with the local species and assess their potential as allies. Velox felt his chest cavity constrict. Sir, with respect, the humans are barely capable of leaving their own planet. Their weapons technology is centuries behind even our most basic systems. What possible contribution could they make to our defense? Drex's image flickered as interference from nearby stellar radiation disrupted the transmission. Commander, we have exhausted every conventional option. The Nexus has proven immune to our advanced weaponry, impervious to our tactical doctrine, and capable of turning our own technology against us. Perhaps what we need is not advanced technology, but something completely different. Something the Nexus has never encountered. The transmission ended, leaving Velox staring at the empty holographic projector. The implications of his orders settled over him like a heavy blanket. The mighty Kethran Empire, masters of biotechnology and stellar engineering, were so desperate that they were turning to a species that still used chemical rockets and metal bullets. "Begin descent protocols," Velox ordered. "Target the largest population center on the primary continent. Activate universal translators and prepare first contact procedures." As the Kethran vessel descended through Earth's atmosphere, its arrival was immediately detected by every radar installation on the planet. Within minutes, communication channels across the globe erupted with panicked reports. Military bases went to high alert. Scientists aimed every available telescope at the approaching craft. News networks began broadcasting emergency bulletins. In dozens of languages. Dr. Sarah Chun was in her laboratory at the International Space Research Center when the alert came through. As one of Earth's leading xenobiological theorists, she had spent her career studying the possibility of extraterrestrial life. She had written papers on potential first contact scenarios, developed protocols for communication with alien intelligence, and participated in countless simulations. But nothing had prepared her for the moment when her theories would become reality. "Dr. Chun," her assistant called from across the lab, "the UN Security Council is requesting your immediate presence at the emergency session. They're saying it's actually happening." Sarah's hands trembled as she closed her research files and gathered her contact protocols. Through the laboratory's large windows, she could see people in the streets, pointing at the sky where a silver dot was growing larger by the minute. Some were running in panic, others stood transfixed, and many were simply staring upward with expressions of wonder and terror. General Marcus Rivera was already at the UN building when Sarah arrived. As the head of the International Defense Initiative, Rivera had spent years preparing for theoretical threats that most people believed would never materialize. Asteroid impacts, global pandemics, nuclear warfare, but alien invasion had always been the scenario that kept him awake at night. "Dr. Chun," Rivera approached her as she entered the emergency session room. "I've reviewed your first contact protocols. I hope you're ready to test them in the real world." The alien ship landed in Central Park, its smooth, organic-looking hull reflecting the late afternoon sunlight like polished bone. It was approximately 300 meters long, with no visible seams or joints, as if the entire vessel had been grown rather than built. Strange bioluminescent patterns pulsed along its surface in rhythmic waves. When the airlock opened, the humans got their first look at the Kethrans. Velox emerged first, his 7-foot frame covered in fine scales that shifted color from deep blue to silver as he moved. His 4 eyes moved independently, scanning the assembled crowd of humans, while his translator device processed the cacophony of languages being spoken around him. "I am Commander Velox of the Kethran Empire." His words emerged in perfect English from the small device attached to his throat. "We come seeking alliance against a threat that endangers all life in this sector of the galaxy." Dr. Chun stepped forward, her scientific training overriding her natural fear. "I am Dr. Sarah Chun, representing the United Nations of Earth. We ... We welcome you to our world, though I must admit we never expected this day would come." Over the following hours, as Velox explained the nature of the Nexus threat, the humans demonstrated something that surprised the Kethran commander. Where other species had responded to the news with panic or immediate surrender, the humans began asking questions. Detailed, technical questions about Nexus technology, tactics, and biology. They wanted to understand their enemy before deciding how to fight it. "You say their ships adapt to energy weapons," General Rivera said during the briefing. "What about kinetic weapons? Old-fashioned projectiles?" Velox's translator struggled with the concept for a moment. "You mean ... solid objects propelled by chemical explosives? We haven't used such primitive weapons for millennia." "Sometimes primitive works," Rivera replied, with a grim smile. "The Nexus has never encountered our weapons because they're too simple to be worth copying." Dr. Chun was taking notes frantically, her mind racing with possibilities. "These biomechanical ships, they're essentially living organisms, correct? That means they can be infected, poisoned, or diseased." "Theoretically, yes," Velox admitted. "But no species has ever successfully developed biological weapons effective against Nexus organisms." "No advanced species," Sarah corrected. "But we've had billions of years of evolutionary warfare on this planet. Earth's biosphere is essentially a 4-billion-year arms race between competing life forms. We might know a few tricks that haven't occurred to your sterile laboratory environments." The human solution, the Nexus Advanced Scouts, arrived like a plague of mechanical locusts, their biomechanical hulls gleaming with an oily iridescence that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. From the observation deck of the hastily established command center, Dr. Sarah Chun watched through telescopic displays as the alien vessels moved with an eerily coordinated precision, like cells in a vast organism responding to a single controlling intelligence. 12 ships in the first wave, General Rivera reported, his voice steady despite the magnitude of what they were facing. Each one approximately twice the size of the Kethran vessel. Long-range sensors indicate they're scanning our defenses and transmitting data back to the main swarm. Commander Velox stood beside them, his 4 eyes tracking the enemy movements with professional assessment. In the past 18 hours, his perception of humans had undergone a fundamental shift. What he had initially dismissed as primitive chaos was revealing itself to be something far more sophisticated, organized adaptability. In previous encounters, Velox explained, the Nexus Scouts would study our defensive positions for approximately 6 hours and withdraw to allow the main force to develop countermeasures. By the time they returned for the actual assault, they had adapted to neutralize every weapon system and tactical approach we possessed. Dr. Chun was frantically typing on her tablet, coordinating with research teams across the globe. "That's actually perfect," she said, causing both military commanders to stare at her in amazement. "If they're studying our defenses to develop countermeasures, then we need to show them defenses that we want them to counter." The plan that emerged over the next few hours was unlike anything in the Kethron military archives. Instead of concealing their capabilities, the humans began openly demonstrating weapons and defensive systems that they had no intention of actually using. They fired nuclear missiles at empty space, operated massive radar installations that did nothing but broadcast random signals, and deployed military units in formations that looked impressive but served no strategic purpose. Meanwhile, the real preparations were happening in ways the Nexus had never encountered. In laboratories around the world, scientists were working with samples of Earth's most aggressive pathogens, modifying them not for warfare against humans, but for introduction into the Nexus biomechanical ships. Viruses that had evolved to attack specific cellular structures were being adapted to target the organic components of Nexus technology in military bases. Engineers were loading projectile weapons with payloads that had nothing to do with explosive force. Some missiles carried billions of engineered bacteria designed to consume specific metals used in Nexus hull construction. Others were filled with spores that would spread through the ship's atmospheric systems, disrupting the neural networks. That coordinated Nexus collective behavior. "This is madness," Captain Thane observed as he watched human technicians loading what appeared to be ordinary artillery shells with a mixture of rust-causing bacteria and aggressive fungal spores. They're using their own planet's ecosystem as a weapon. But it was the human military doctrine that truly confounded the Kethran observers. Where other species developed unified command structures and coordinated battle plans, the humans were deliberately fragmenting their forces into independent units with contradictory orders. Some groups were told to fight to the death, others to retreat at the first sign of contact. Some units were equipped with high-tech weaponry, others with equipment that seemed centuries out of date. The Nexus expects logical, predictable responses, General Rivera explained to Velox as they reviewed the deployment plans. Their collective intelligence excels at processing organized information and developing countermeasures. But chaos? Random, contradictory actions based on individual initiative rather than central planning? That's not something their hive mind is designed to handle. When the main Nexus fleet arrived, it consisted of over 300 vessels arranged in perfect geometric formations. Their approach was a masterpiece of coordinated movement, each ship maintaining exact distances and trajectories calculated to provide maximum mutual support. It was beautiful, efficient, and utterly predictable. The first surprise came when the human defenders opened fire with weapons that the Nexus scouts had never observed. Instead of the nuclear missiles and energy weapons they had studied, the humans launched thousands of primitive kinetic projectiles, chunks of metal and concrete fired from chemical-powered cannons that should have been obsolete centuries ago. The Nexus ship's adaptive armor, designed to counter sophisticated energy weapons, was completely ineffective against simple physical impact. Worse, many of the projectiles carried biological payloads that immediately began spreading through the ship's organic systems. The first wave of Nexus vessels found their hull integrity compromised by aggressive Earth bacteria, while their neural networks were disrupted by fungal infections that interfered with their collective communication. But the real shock came when the Nexus attempted to adapt their tactics. Every time they modified their approach to counter one type of human response, they would encounter a completely different strategy from another group of defenders. Units that had retreated in apparent cowardice would suddenly launch suicidal attacks from unexpected directions. Weapons that had seemed primitive would reveal hidden capabilities or be used in ways that defied conventional tactical logic. Dr. Chun was coordinating the biological warfare aspects from the command center when she noticed something remarkable in the data streams. General, Commander Velox, look at this. The Nexus communication patterns are becoming increasingly erratic. Their collective intelligence appears to be confused. The displays showed Nexus ships beginning to operate independently, rather than as a unified force. Some vessels were attempting to retreat, while others pressed forward with attacks. The perfect geometric formations were breaking apart as individual ships pursued contradictory objectives. It's like watching a computer program crash, Velox observed with amazement. Their collective mind is trying to process too many variables simultaneously. The random nature of human tactics is overwhelming their decision-making algorithms. Battle continued for 14 hours, but it was unlike any conflict in recorded galactic history. Instead of a systematic exchange of firepower between organized forces, it resembled a massive brawl involving hundreds of independent participants, each following their own rules and objectives. Human units would appear without warning, engage the enemy with whatever weapons they had available, then disappear before the Nexus could mount an effective response. The turning point came when Dr. Chun's biological weapons reached critical mass. The engineered pathogens had spread throughout the Nexus fleet, not just attacking their ships, but disrupting the neural links that maintained their collective consciousness. Individual Nexus organisms, suddenly cut off from the hive mind that had guided them for millennia, found themselves experiencing something they had never known: independent thought. Many simply shut down, unable to function without the constant guidance of the collective. Others began exhibiting erratic behavior, attacking their own ships, or attempting to communicate with the human forces. A few even appeared to be attempting surrender, though their lack of individual identity made such concepts almost meaningless. As the last Nexus vessels either fled or were destroyed, Velox found himself standing in the command center surrounded by cheering humans. The celebration was chaotic, disorganized, and completely lacking in military protocol. Exactly what he should have expected from these remarkable beings. "Commander," Dr. Chun approached him, her face flushed with exhaustion and triumph. "I believe we need to discuss humanity's place in the galactic community. It seems we may have more to offer than anyone initially realized." Over the following weeks, as the full scope of the human victory became clear, the Kethran Empire began a fundamental reassessment of their understanding of intelligence and civilization. The humans had defeated an enemy that had consumed dozens of advanced species, not through superior technology or sophisticated strategy, but through something the galaxy had forgotten: the power of chaos, adaptability, and the willingness to sacrifice everything for survival. The Nexus threat was not eliminated. Such a vast collective could not be destroyed by a single battle, but their expansion had been halted for the first time in their recorded history. More importantly, their belief in their own invincibility had been shattered. Word of the human victory spread throughout the galaxy, inspiring other species to resist and adapt their own defensive strategies. Dr. Sarah Chun became Earth's first ambassador to the Galactic Council, not as a representative of a primitive species seeking guidance, but as the voice of a civilization that had fundamentally changed how the galaxy understood the nature of intelligence and warfare. General Rivera established the first human Kethran military academy, where officers from both species learned to combine advanced technology with adaptive tactics. Commander Velox returned to the Kethran homeworld as a changed being. His reports to High Command stressed not just the human military victory, but the underlying philosophy that had made it possible. The humans had succeeded because they embraced uncertainty, valued individual initiative over collective planning, and maintained the kind of creative chaos that came from never being the apex predator on their own world. In his final report, Velox wrote, "We classified humanity as primitive because they had not achieved the technological sophistication or social unity that we associate with advanced civilization. We failed to recognize that their apparent weaknesses were actually strengths developed through billions of years of evolutionary pressure. They are not primitive. They are simply evolved for a different kind of survival." And in facing the Nexus, it was exactly that kind of survival that the galaxy needed. The humans had not simply won a battle. They had awakened the galaxy to new possibilities. In showing that chaos could defeat order, that primitive weapons could overcome advanced defenses, and that individual creativity could triumph over collective intelligence, they had proven that there was no single path to intelligence or strength. The galaxy would never underestimate Earth again.